12, I visited our family ranch in the Mexico countryside for the first time in years. The property's been in our family for centuries. The pictures and paintings of my ancestors hanging throughout the ranch always made me want to get home before dark. All of my cousins were in a separate room, eating and talking. When I went to the bathroom, I noticed a door right next to the bathroom. I assumed it was a bedroom, but I didn't check out of respect for my uncle, the owner. While doing my business, I heard what sounded like an old wooden rocking chair, rocking in the next room. I didn't think much of it. I went on to washing my hands, and that's when I heard nails clawing at the bathroom door. I didn't panic right away. I know how my cousins can be, and I thought someone who needed to use the bathroom was just playing a lighthearted prank. But when I opened the door, no one was there. I rushed back to my cousins, and I brushed off the situation without mentioning it. Later that day, my cousins told me some scary stories about the ranch, and they revealed it was haunted. They said an old lady used to live in the room next to the bathroom, and sometimes, when you're near her space, she'll rock in her chair. Back around 1992, I was a sophomore in high school, and unlike most of my friends, I didn't work a typical fast food or retail job. I was great with my hands, and I did things like construction, demolition, flooring, auto mechanics. I started working at 14, so I was always paid under the table. It was beneficial for both sides since I was only called when needed, and I was willing to work evenings and weekends. One of my employers did remodeling jobs like restaurants, bars, retail shops, commercial projects. Those were the kind that were perfect for me because they could only be worked on after hours and weekends. It wasn't uncommon for one employer to leave me alone with a list of things to do, mostly demolition. I did this while the other crew worked on installation and remodeling. I was a kid, but they respected me because I did what I was supposed to do. And I did it without complaints. I was paid well. I made more in one night than my friends at McDonald's made all week. One day, I got a call about a project for the following Saturday. I was told to bring food, drinks, because there was nothing nearby. I filled a small cooler with Cokes, Gatorade, chips, and a couple sandwiches. Back then, I could eat a whole pizza and burn it off. I didn't have a license yet, so starting that Saturday, my employers picked me up, drove me to the site, and left me there, alone. I rarely worked with other crew members. They were all the skilled labor guys. I was just the demo kid. This part was my major downfall. I didn't pay attention to where we were going. I was too busy talking about cars, and at the time, my goal was to save up enough money to buy an old muscle car and rebuild it. It took a long time to arrive at the site. It was in the middle of nowhere. You may not think California has places like this, but back in the early 90s, there were big plots of land and homes out in the Mojave Desert. We left the highway and went down a few other 2-lane roads for a long distance. He asked about my drinks and pulled out a jug of water that he had in his truck. It looked like it had been there a while, but he told me to take it since the water to the house I was working on was shut off. As we pulled up to the property, he was in a hurry to get to another site. So I hurried to help him unload the breaker bars, shovels, pry bar, hammer, broom, trash bins, and a small tool bag. He said that he would pick me up at 5 or 6, since there was no electricity at the site either. That was his way of saying that I was only getting paid until then. It was never too outrageous, and we always had a good understanding of those kinds of things. He drove away, and I was left all alone. I walked into the mostly empty house, and I began removing what was left of the furniture and appliances, ripping out the floors, gutting the kitchen and bathrooms. Removing the paneling was next. This project was what we now call a flip. They were going to fix it up and sell it. Almost immediately, I got a little bit spooked by the place. It was very odd. Now, remember, I was used to working alone all night, and this was the middle of a sunny Saturday. The house was old, dark, musty, and sort of cool, the kind of cool that gives you goosebumps. To add to the spook factor, let me describe what I remember about the house. Imagine being back in the 60s. There was dark green carpet that looked like matted down broccoli, pine wood with dark stains, old granny curtains, an avocado green sink, and the paneling was actual tongue and groove boards. The old furniture and stuffed animals looked at least 30 years old. The overall style was right out of an old Western ranch. There were actual wagon wheels inside and outside the home. I had an old battery-powered radio that only picked up a few stations, but I was just happy for the noise. I started removing all the junk, and as I normally did when there wasn't a dumpster on site, I made a trash pile. I tore the flooring out next, and to my delight, everything came up with ease. All I had to do was rip, cut, toss. Then, I used a big demo hammer to tear apart the kitchen in less than an hour. I ended up using the big jug of water to periodically wash my hands and face, but by late noon, the desert dryness starts taking the moisture from you. By then, I was down to my last drink and had already eaten everything I brought. No worries, the guys should be here in a couple of hours, right? As the time for them to arrive neared, I finished the last of my tasks. I even swept the entire place so that it could be ready for the rehab crew to start making it look modern. It wasn't a typical hot desert day for that time of year, but as soon as the sun set, it began to cool rapidly. I had on a flannel shirt, but that wasn't enough, and it was starting to get dark. This was before cell phones became common, and the house had no electricity, no water, or phone. I climbed on top of the roof, hoping to see something in the distance, and miles down, I saw the road connected to a smaller road. There were a few homes, but they were all dark. My first thought was to hike to the neighbor's house and ask to use the phone, but no one was home, and this home also looked abandoned. The early 90s was the start of a recession, so it wasn't uncommon for a lot of foreclosed homes to be in track of occupied homes. I worked in a lot of those at the time. I started thinking about my options as it grew darker. I could stay at the house until morning, hike a few miles with what water I had left, or wait until morning and start hiking then. I also realized that no one knew where I was except my boss. I don't know if he told anyone else where I was, and my family wouldn't miss me until at least Sunday night. I didn't even tell them that I was going to work there. They knew how much I would work to save up for my car, so they never worried about me not coming home. I didn't have a flashlight or any way to make a fire, but the night sky looked amazing and the moon was bright. Of course, that doesn't mean I didn't try. I was going to make a small fire out of construction debris when the temperature hit the low 40s, but that didn't pan out. My only option was to wait inside the empty, creepy house. It seemed even creepier when sitting alone in the dark. At roughly 8 p.m., my radio's batteries start to die. It was my only source of little light and noise. I grabbed a wooden chair and I sat in the living room facing the door. I heard wind, odd animal noises, and what sounded like leaves crunching under feet. I started shivering from the cold, so I tried to make a fire in the fireplace. Picture Tom Hanks trying to start a fire in Castaway. At least it was keeping my mind on my situation. Sitting there next to the fireplace made the house seem even darker than it should have. It was already dark in the daytime, but now, even with the moonlight, I was essentially sitting in complete darkness. My mind started to play tricks on me, I saw shadows moving inside and outside. I also heard someone talking or whispering, so I got up from my chair and I yelled, "Hello?" Hello? The instant I did, something fell on the other side of the house. I ran back outside. At least I could see better in the moonlight. I heard noises and I saw movement in the distance, but I couldn't make anything out of it. I had my tools sitting next to the corner of the house, ready for my boss to return, so I ran to them, grabbed the Big Daddy. It was the heavy pry bar that I'd used for the demolition, and I was ready to defend myself from who or whatever was out there. I have to keep moving because my shirt wasn't enough to keep me warm. The wind was also picking up. There wasn't a single light around me. I didn't want to risk falling in the dark if I tried to climb back onto the roof, so I got on top of the gate, hoping to see some house or car lights. I immediately thought of the horror stories that people tell about Satanist groups. Strange disappearances, people coming to the Mojave Desert just to bury bodies. Every noise had me on edge. Every shadow had my heart pounding. I knew no one was in that house, but I swore I heard noises from inside. I huddled up on the front porch, looking into the living room window, expecting to see someone any moment. So much had already happened by 11 that I knew it was going to be a long night. I didn't know how I was going to make it another 6 hours until daybreak. The moment lights started to appear on the horizon, I planned to take what little water remained and walk east. I knew going east would eventually lead me to a paved road. Closer to midnight, I was wide awake with my eyes fixed on the dirt road, thinking a car would come any minute. I kept turning to look inside each time I heard a new noise. I tried to tell myself that it was just a rat or some other kind of rodent. I saw a shadow move from the kitchen to the hall, and I jumped out of my seat, knowing it was human, not an animal. I started backing my way off the porch towards the debris pile, but I tripped and I fell on the ground. I scrambled back to my feet, but fell again. It was like something pushed me down, and suddenly there were bright lights coming closer as I laid there. I jumped up and saw my boss. He was giving me a "what the heck are you doing" look, but I was just glad to see him. I couldn't even be mad. I asked him what happened, and he apologized, but he thought the other crew was coming to get me. It wasn't until he asked the other crew leader how far along I'd gotten that they realized their mistake. It took him almost 2 hours to get there from where they were, and he felt terrible enough to pay me for the entire time I was there. He also gave me a Coke from his cooler, and I drank it in one gulp. Once we got back to civilization, we went to a drive-thru, and I ate like I'd never eaten before. On the drive home, I asked about the house and told him how creepy it was. He said he didn't have any information on the home, only what we were supposed to do. After that, I made sure to always have extra batteries, flashlights, and double the amount of liquid.